Picture this. You wake up to a quiet morning. You look out the window and see the sea. It looks infinite, calm, blue. But that calmness is the greatest illusion on earth. Because while you sip your coffee, generals, CEOs, and presidents are deciding who really owns that vast liquid empire. The ocean has never been just salty water. It's the world's longest highway, the biggest bank, the largest graveyard, and at the same time the most powerful weapon humanity has ever built. Nearly 90% of everything you touch, wear, or eat has traveled by ship. Every phone in your hand once sailed across an ocean before ending up in your pocket. But here's the uncomfortable truth. The ocean does not belong to everyone. It belongs to whoever can control it. Now think with me. If you owned the sea, what exactly would you own? Global trade? Yes. The energy that powers entire nations? Absolutely. The future of wars? Without question. From ancient Rome to Portugal to England, and today the United States, every empire that wanted to dominate the world began by dominating the sea. And now China is building artificial islands in the South China Sea, as if they were Lego blocks floating in contested waters, just to remind us all that the battle is far from over. The ocean is the invisible chessboard of the greatest war of our time, a war that doesn't trend on your social feed, but quietly decides whether your food will arrive, whether your Wi-Fi will work, whether the price of gas will explode. And here's the question that should keep you hooked until the end. Whoever controls the ocean, controls the planet. And whoever loses the ocean, loses history. So get ready. Because today we're diving into a conflict without flags raised, but full of aircraft carriers, nuclear submarines, and billions of dollars flowing like the tides. By the end, you'll realize the blue ocean that looks so free is, in fact, the most expensive prison ever built. Whoever owns the sea owns the world. The first salty truth. Here's the first thing you need to swallow like seawater in your lungs. The ocean may cover 70% of the planet, but it's treated like a corporate free-for-all. The surface looks endless. But beneath that horizon is a spreadsheet with names, borders, shipping lanes, and invisible walls drawn by men in suits who've probably never swum farther than a hotel pool. The salty truth is this. The ocean has always been an empire's most profitable illusion. Nations tell you it's free and shared, but what they really mean is, it's ours until someone bigger takes it away. Imagine the ocean as the world's largest casino. Billions of containers move like chips across the blue table. Some players gamble with oil, others with grain, some with iPhones. The rules? Simple. If you can guard your fleet with enough firepower, you stay in the game. If not, someone else will reshuffle the deck. And don't kid yourself. Every ship you see is a floating dollar sign. That cheap t-shirt you bought online, it crossed the Pacific in a steel box stacked with tens of thousands just like it. That sushi you ate last Friday? It traveled through international waters guarded by navies with missiles locked and loaded. The ocean doesn't just move goods, it moves power. Here's where it gets ironic. Countries pretend the sea is neutral ground, a place of shared humanity. Yet ask yourself, if it's so neutral, why are 11 aircraft carrier strike groups currently patrolling like mafia enforcers, making sure no one touches the wrong water? Why does every coast guard in the world now look suspiciously like a small navy in disguise? The ocean is sold to us as a symbol of freedom. The open sea, endless horizons, freedom of navigation, cute phrases, marketing slogans. In reality, it's just another marketplace, except this one is big enough to drown entire nations. Because here's the quiet part. No one says out loud. Whoever controls the sea lanes controls the price of your life. Not metaphorically, literally. Your groceries, your medicine, your electricity. Try surviving a single month without maritime shipping. Picture your city cut off because the global ocean monopoly decided the game was too expensive for you to keep playing. The first salty truth is bitter. The ocean was never blue. It has always been green, the color of money. And when someone asks who owns the sea, the real answer isn't humanity. It's whoever has the ships, the ports, and the guns to make sure you don't. So next time you stand by the shore and watch the waves, remember, you're not looking at freedom. You're looking at the world's most expensive real estate, leased out by force renewed in blood. and constantly up for auction to the highest bidder. Ever felt like the ocean isn't as free as it looks? Let me know below. From Rome to aircraft carriers, every empire that ever mattered had one thing in common. They learned to ride the waves before they ruled the land. Forget the statues, the palaces, the fancy gold crowns. Those were just trophies. The real crown jewel was always a fleet. Take Rome. Everyone remembers the legions, the sandals, the togas. But Rome wasn't Rome until it mastered the Mediterranean, turning it into its private lake. The Romans had a phrase for it: Mare Nostrum, our sea. Notice the wording, not the sea, our sea. A subtle reminder that once you control the water, you control the narrative. Fast forward 1,000 years. The Portuguese, a tiny nation crammed on the edge of Europe, somehow drew lines on maps that stretched from Brazil to India. How? Not through kindness. Through ships, cannons, and enough arrogance to claim the world's oceans like Monopoly squares. Then came the British, who built an empire so wide the sun literally couldn't set on it. Why? Because their navy turned the Atlantic into a private toll road. They didn't just own colonies. They owned the lanes between colonies. Picture every ocean as a freeway. Britain wasn't selling tickets at the gate. They were the gate. And in the modern era, America took the script and added Hollywood production value. The United States Navy today operates with a budget larger than the GDP of most countries. Its aircraft carriers are basically floating cities armed with nuclear teeth. Think of them as mobile Death Stars, except instead of blowing up planets, they guarantee that Walmart shelves stay stocked. Empires aren't measured by how many square miles of dirt they own. They're measured by how much saltwater they can police. Land armies might win battles, but navies decide which countries get to exist long enough to fight them. Here's a sobering fact. The US controls nearly every major ocean choke point, from the Strait of Hormuz to the Panama Canal to the South China Sea, at least for now. That's not an accident. It's the 21st century version of Rome calling the Mediterranean ours. Except now the playground is global, and the stakes are nuclear. So what happens when China builds islands in the South China Sea? Or when Russia sends submarines creeping along the Arctic routes? It's not about fish or sand or even oil. It's about rewriting the phrase Mare Nostrum, shifting ownership of the world's highways from one empire to the next. And that's the cliffhanger of history. Every empire that commanded the oceans eventually fell. Rome drowned, Portugal faded, Britain shrank. The question is, when the tide turns against America, who will be left holding the wheel? If history really is just one empire sinking while another sails, comment, I knew it. Ocean, money, weapons. The ocean isn't just water, it's the bloodstream of capitalism. And every empire that controls it acts like a cardiologist with a knife, deciding which nations get a pulse and which collapse into cardiac arrest. Nearly 90% of global trade moves by sea. Picture that. Almost everything in your home floated here first. Your TV didn't magically appear at Best Buy. It spent weeks stacked in a steel coffin on a container ship, sandwiched between sneakers, soybeans, and maybe a Lamborghini or two. Global shipping lanes are nothing less than arteries pumping life through the planet's economy. Now imagine someone puts a gun to those arteries. That's what navies are. They don't just protect. They remind every ship captain that freedom of navigation is only free as long as someone bigger lets you pass. Oil? Forget pipelines. The world still gulps down 60% of its petroleum through tankers. Block a single choke point, say the Strait of Hormuz, and suddenly your gas prices don't just rise, they sprint like an Olympic sprinter on steroids. Food, grain, soy, rice, fish, all cheaper to ship by sea than by land. You don't control the ocean, you don't control lunch. Simple as that. Oceans are also weapons factories. Submarines patrol the depths with nuclear warheads. Destroyers bristle with tomahawks. Even satellites rely on data carried by undersea cables stretching like invisible veins across the seabed. Whoever slices those cables doesn't just win a war, they unplug civilization. Think about the irony. We call the sea international waters, yet it's one of the most militarized zones on Earth. You can't even float a rubber duck without drifting into some admiral's exclusive economic zone. And the price tag of this watery chessboard? In 2023, global military spending reached over $2.4 trillion, with oceans swallowing the lion's share of that budget. Here's the metaphor no one wants to face. The ocean is less like a playground and more like a casino mixed with a minefield. Every tanker is a stack of chips. Every missile cruiser is a loaded dice, and every empire plays the same game. Win big or sink. So when you look at a calm horizon, you're not seeing peace. You're seeing the most expensive poker table in history. And the players? America, China, Russia, Europe, betting with carriers, submarines, and enough firepower to boil the very water they're fighting over. The sea, in other words, is not a frontier. It's a weaponized ATM. And the password changes daily. If this made you realize the ocean is basically a global casino, comment, "I knew it." If the Cold War painted the world red, the new one is painting it blue. The arena isn't Berlin checkpoints or nuclear silos in Siberia. It's the Pacific Ocean, a chessboard so wide it takes weeks to cross, but so small when you realize two superpowers are playing with pieces the size of floating cities. On one side, the United States, the old champion, with aircraft carriers that look like mobile fortresses and bases scattered across islands like Monopoly hotels. Their motto is simple: we own the sea until you prove otherwise. On the other side, China, the challenger, building artificial islands out of sand, concrete, and audacity. Each island sprouting airstrips, missile batteries, radar towers, like barnacles, but armed with hypersonics. Their message is equally blunt. This is ours now. Swim around if you don't like it. Welcome to the South China Sea, the world's most contested puddle. Half of all global shipping sails through it. Trillions of dollars pass through each year. Whoever holds it doesn't just control trade. They control the world's bloodstream. America patrols the area under the banner of freedom of navigation, which sounds noble, until you realize freedom is enforced at gunpoint by destroyers and submarines lurking just out of sight. China, meanwhile, waves old maps from dynasties long dead, claiming history as a legal deed. It's not diplomacy. It's maritime cosplay with nukes. And here's the absurd part. Both sides know they can't openly fire the first shot, so they circle each other like sharks, flashing teeth, testing nerves, buzzing aircraft, shadowing ships. Every encounter is a coin flip. Will this be a routine patrol, or the spark that rewrites history? Think about the irony. Two of the world's largest economies bound together by trade, threatening to blow up the very sea lanes that keep their factories alive. It's like two chefs trying to strangle each other in the kitchen while the stove keeps burning. The Pacific isn't big enough for two empires. That's the salty math. And just like Rome faced Carthage, or Britain faced Germany, the logic of history suggests this game can't end in a handshake. One power will blink or sink. America has the ships, but China has the patience. And the ocean, as every sailor knows, doesn't reward speed. It rewards endurance. If you feel this tension building like a storm, comment, "I knew it." Pirates and corporations. When you hear the word pirate, you probably picture a guy with a wooden leg, an eye patch, and a parrot screaming profanities on his shoulder. Cute. Disney made billions selling you that cartoon. But real piracy never left. It just traded rum for RPGs and parrots for satellite phones. Take the Somali coast in the early 2000s. Tiny skiffs with rusted Kalashnikovs hijacked oil tankers worth hundreds of millions. A handful of desperate men in sandals could stop global shipping in its tracks. Insurance companies panicked. Shipping firms rerouted. The cost of bread in Europe jumped because some fisherman decided the ocean was his retirement plan. And then came the solution. Corporations. Private security contractors, ex-soldiers with contracts bigger than the GDP of small nations, now patrol these waters. They guard tankers with heavy machine guns, transforming cargo ships into floating fortresses. Pirates didn't disappear. They just ran into someone charging $20,000 a day to shoot first. But piracy isn't only about skiffs in the Indian Ocean. It's about corporations turning the sea into their playground. Think oil giants drilling wherever they can buy permission or silence. Think fishing fleets sweeping entire ecosystems into extinction, backed by government subsidies so bloated they might as well be state-sanctioned plunder. The line between pirate and CEO. A tailored suit. And here's the irony. Nations scream about sovereignty, but they outsource protection of their sea lanes to corporations. Maersk, ExxonMobil, and MSC control more tonnage than some navies. private companies decide which routes are safe, which ports stay open, and how much freedom of navigation actually costs. The modern pirate flag isn't black with skulls. It's blue with logos. Picture it. A container ship bristling with security teams, cameras, drones overhead. Its decks stacked with consumer goods. Is this trade? Or is this war with better branding? Either way, the ocean has become a marketplace where corporations buy influence, rent armies, and rewrite the laws of the sea while the rest of us scroll TikTok. Because here's the bitter joke. Jack Sparrow never robbed you. The men in ties did. And they didn't even need a cannon, just a boardroom and a balance sheet. If you think the real pirates wear suits, let me know below. Invisible weapons, subsea cables, and sonar. You think wars are fought with missiles, bombs, and flashy aircraft carriers? Cute. The real battlefield lies beneath the waves, where most of humanity never looks. Down there in the pitch-black silence lies the nervous system of the modern world. Subsea cables. More than 95% of global internet traffic doesn't fly through satellites. It crawls through cables laid across the ocean floor. Thin, fragile glass veins that carry trillions of dollars in financial transactions, billions of messages, and your late-night search history. If the ocean is the bloodstream of the economy, these cables are the synapses of its brain. Cut one, and you don't just black out Netflix, you can paralyze a country. Now imagine this. Russia parks a submarine near an Atlantic cable. Or China deploys a deep-sea drone close to one in the Pacific. Suddenly every trader on Wall Street sweats. Every general at the Pentagon flinches. Because in an age where data is currency, cutting a cable is the new act of war. But it's not just cables. It's sonar. An invisible weapon you never hear until it's too late. Sonar maps every inch of the seabed. Tracks submarines, guides torpedoes. Think of it as the ocean's CCTV, except the cameras scream back. Entire undersea wars happen in silence, where a single ping can mean life or death. And here's the irony. While nations flex their nuclear arsenals, their real Achilles heel is a string of fiber optics thinner than a garden hose, protected by, what exactly? International law? A stern warning from the UN? Please. A determined fisherman with an anchor could cut the digital lifeline of entire continents. Corporations know it. Governments know it. That's why there's an arms race under the water. Deep-diving drones, stealth subs, and even cable repair ships that might double as cable-cutting ships when orders come down. Picture this. The next great war won't start with an explosion. It'll start with silence. Your phone stops working, ATMs freeze, stock markets blink out. And you realize someone, somewhere, just tugged on a cable lying in the dark. The ocean doesn't just hide weapons. It is the weapon. And the scariest part? No one has to pull a trigger. All it takes is scissors. If the thought of invisible wars under the sea gave you chills, comment, I knew it. Fish, water, and blood. When people talk about wars at sea, they picture oil tankers and aircraft carriers. But here's the dirty secret. The next wars may not be fought over fuel or flags. They'll be fought over fish. Sounds absurd, right? Until you realize fish is the last wild food we still hunt on an industrial scale. And demand is rising like a tide no navy can stop. In Asia alone, fish provides more than 20% of daily protein. Which means when the sea runs out of tuna, it doesn't just ruin sushi night. It destabilizes nations. Enter the new pirates. Industrial fishing fleets. China alone sends out a dark fleet of over 2,600 ships. Vessels so massive they can strip an ecosystem bare. These ships shut off their GPS, raid protected zones, and scrape the ocean floor like it's a clearance sale. Japan, Korea, Spain, they all do it. Each nation treating the ocean like a buffet with no bill. But there is a bill. Entire species are collapsing. Bluefin tuna stocks have dropped by more than 90% in the last century. Squid are vanishing. Coral reefs, the nurseries of the sea, are bleaching into bone-white graveyards. And when the fish go, people follow. Fishermen lose livelihoods, coastal economies collapse, and hungry nations grow desperate. And desperate nations fight. The so-called Cod Wars between Iceland and the UK in the 1970s were just the appetizer. Today, Chinese and Vietnamese boats ram each other in the South China Sea. Indonesian coast guards literally set fire to poaching vessels. Forget Game of Thrones. This is Game of Fish, and it's bloody. Now add climate change into the mix. Rising temperatures are pushing fish northward, sparking fresh clashes in the Arctic. Melting ice opens new feeding grounds, and suddenly Canada, Russia, and Norway are snarling at each other like hungry wolves. The ocean isn't just shrinking, it's shifting. And with it, the map of who eats and who starves. Here's the irony. The ocean provides free food, yet it's guarded with more guns than most land borders. Why? Because a single fishing ground can be worth billions. Imagine an underwater gold rush. Except the gold has gills and bleeds when stabbed. The ocean is running out of patience, out of fish, out of mercy. And when the last net comes up empty, the fight won't be about money anymore. It'll be about survival. So the question isn't whether nations will spill blood over fish. The question is, how soon? If the idea of wars over fish feels closer than you thought, comment, I knew it. The coming wars. The ocean remembers everything. And right now, it's remembering the ice. For centuries, the Arctic was nature's fortress, locked in frozen silence, untouchable by navies, untouchable by greed. But the ice is melting, slowly. Then suddenly, what was once a white wall has become a blue highway. And highways invite traffic, and traffic invites conflict. The Arctic is now the ultimate prize in the ocean's inheritance battle. Beneath its thawing crust lie 90 billion barrels of oil and more gas than most countries will ever need. Add to that new shipping routes that shave thousands of miles off global trade. Whoever owns the Arctic doesn't just own resources, they own time. And in economics, time is power. So who wants it? Everyone. Russia has planted flags on the seabed, as if claiming the North Pole like a kid calling dibs on the last cookie. The US and Canada are racing to expand their exclusive zones. China, despite being nowhere near the Arctic, now calls itself a near-Arctic state, a title as absurd as declaring yourself near-rich because you shop at Gucci. But here's the irony. Melting ice isn't opening peace. It's opening wounds. Submarines now slip under thinning glaciers, testing sonar. Icebreakers plow through routes that never existed. Military bases sprout in places where, just decades ago, only polar bears had citizenship. And what about the bears, the fish, the fragile ecosystems? They don't matter. Because to the powers that be, the Arctic isn't a home, it's a vault being cracked open by climate change, with global powers waiting to loot whatever spills out. The coming wars won't look like D-Day. They'll look like quiet incursions. Survey ships mapping scientific research, drones buzzing under the ice, satellite pings marking territories invisible to the human eye. And then, one day, a clash. Not a full war, at first. Just an accident. A collision between a US destroyer and a Russian sub. A Chinese icebreaker refusing to move. A gunshot in the snow that echoes across the sea. History whispers its warning. Rome collapsed when it lost its seas. Britain shrank when it lost its trade routes. America faces challengers circling like sharks. And climate change is the dealer, reshuffling the ocean's cards faster than anyone can play. The question isn't whether a war will come. It's whether it will happen before or after the ice is gone. If the thought of wars born from melting ice unsettles you, comment, I knew it. The last horizon. Stand on a shore at sunset, and the ocean feels eternal. Waves crashing, gulls circling, the smell of salt and thyme. It tricks you into believing this blue expanse belongs to everyone, that it's eternal, untouchable, sacred. But the truth, the ocean has never belonged to everyone. It has always belonged to someone powerful enough to guard it, tax it, and, when necessary, weaponize it. Empires don't fight for deserts. They don't bleed for mountains. They drown for oceans. Because whoever controls the sea doesn't just control territory, they control possibility. Every empire in history has proven the same equation. Land plus sea, power. Land, sea, obituary. Today, the ocean is more contested than ever. America still sails like it owns every horizon. China builds islands like stepping stones to empire. Russia drills beneath the Arctic, as if oil were a birthright. Corporations drag nets across the seabed, scooping life into profit margins. And all of them pretend this is progress. But progress has a price. Ask yourself, when does the ocean stop being blue? When does it finally reveal its true color? Red. Red from oil spills. Red from overfishing. Red from warships testing their freedom of navigation. Red from blood. The cruelest irony is this: the ocean doesn't care who wins. It will outlast every empire, every fleet, every artificial island. Rome sank. Britain shrank. America will one day fade. The waves will still crash. The tides will still rise. And the sea will quietly erase the names of those who thought they owned it. So what's left for us? To watch, to fear, maybe, but also to understand that the battles over the sea are not distant. They shape the cost of your groceries, the speed of your internet, the fuel in your car, the future of your children. You may not live on an aircraft carrier, but you live in the shadow of its wake. Here's the last horizon then. The ocean is the stage where humanity keeps performing the same play. Act 1, discovery. Act 2, conquest. Act 3, collapse. And Act 4? Well, that depends on whether we learn to see the sea not as a battlefield, but as a mirror. Because every wave carries the reflection of our greed. So let me ask you, when the next empire sinks, when the next flag burns, when the next fleet rusts into the seabed, what color will the ocean be? Blue, green, or red? Which of these battles over the sea shook you the most? Tell me in the comments. And if your brain didn't drown somewhere along the way, subscribe before they start charging rent for free thought.